Hello everyone, I'm Chol. Linux cluster on CentOS 6 and 7, Chapter 13, Apache Cluster with Conga and CCS. Main topics. This chapter will cover this kind of topics: the rgmanager introduction, and Apache configuration for cluster, and shared storages for Apache cluster. And 4. Apache Cluster configuration using Conga, and Apache Cluster configuration using CCS. rgmanager introduction. rgmanager means resource group managers. So resource group manager normally provide a failover of user-defined resources collected into groups. So normally the resource group can support the cluster services. Normally, rgmanager improves the mechanism for keeping a service especially high available. For high available service, we can use rgmanager. And the rgmanager also designed the primary for cold failover. Cold failover means full application restart. In this case, if the service has a problem to supply this one to cluster client, normally we need to restart this kind of application. In this case, we can say it's a cold failover. And the rgmanager also use the system style init script to accept start, stop, restart, and stater. If you start the rgmanager and this manager is registered as a service with the cluster manager. So if you want to use the rgmanager, normally your system now must running the cluster manager first. And after that, cluster manager will show this kind of services you are running now using this command cman _tool services. And the one or more the resources combined to form a resource group or cluster service. Normally, the cluster service can include or contain the several combined resources. For example, if you want to supply the Apache cluster service, in this case, this Apache cluster service need file system, IP address, and script. Each one can include the member of the resource, and this kind of the resource members can support this kind of the service. And this kind of resource normally has a recovery policy like restart, relocate, and disable. If the service is stopped or has a problem, then we can restart this kind of service in node the problem happened. But some nodes cannot restart this kind of service. Then we can relocate this service to another node. In this case, we can use the relocate. If you want to just disable service, then we can use this policy. rgmanager commands. So first one, to know what to see the result of the rgmanager, we can use this kind of command. First one, displaying the cluster service. So first one, clu state. This one also will show the service status. And the cman tool services as well. This also will show the current services. And number 2, clu svc the ADM. This is a cluster user service administration utility. Using this one, we can, like administrator, can enable, disable, relocate, and restart user services in the cluster. For example, to use this command, we need to start rgmanager first, and after that, if we want to see all the options, then -h, the help, and after that, r, and web service name. Then r means the relocated to another cluster node. And the capital R means the restart. And the S, the web service name, and the member, for example, like a node01.chol.com. In this case, in this member node, please start this service. And the E means enable, and the D mean disable. So in this member node, please disable this service. In this chapter, normally I will use this kind of Apache Cluster Lab environment. So there are three cluster nodes, node 1, node 2, and node 3. And each cluster now using this kind of IP address 192.168, 89, and 8010. But I will use this IP address 192.168.80.50 as the floating IP address. Floating IP address means the IP address client can access using the cluster environment. And when I configure this kind of cluster service, the name is a web service. And I already told you in case of Apache Cluster need three the resources. For example, IP resource. Second, application resource. Third, file system resource. In case of IP resource, I will use this floating IP address 192.168.8.50. So client can access this IP address to access or to visit our web service. And in case of the application resource, name will be the HTTPD, and this one will use the script where here etc/rc.d, init.d, and HTTPD. Number 3, the file system resource. In case of the web server need the root, the directory. Normally we use this directory var/ww/html. So in my case will be the name with web root, and to mount this directory I will create the GFS file system. When I configure this web service, and this web service belong to this failover domain. In my case, I have the failover domains, web server and database, and this one belong to this web server. So using this kind of the cluster lab environment, I will show you how to configure or set up Apache Cluster. Okay, Apache configuration for cluster. At first time, disable HTTP service in all road to let HTTP start by cluster. So using config, HTTP must be turned off. Second, configure Apache the main configuration file. This one, etc httpd conf/httpd.conf. So here, first one, listen 192.168.50 and 8080 mean the port number. So this one will be the floating IP address client can access. Second, enable the server status on all cluster node. So from the all, this one, all the cluster members can access this information. So this one will show the server status. So in my case, this one, 192.168.8.0/24. So this network can access the directory to see or check the server status. And after that, service HTTPD restart. At first time, even if you don't restart HTTP, no problem, because this web server will be started by the cluster. And number 3, copy Apache configuration file to all nodes. So all cluster nodes must have the same Apache configuration file. Share the storage for Apache cluster. So to check your cluster service first, so rc, okay, restart and rc on. Lucy also restarted to use the Conga, especially on manager host. And after that, you can use to check the status, the current status of your cluster system, CLU state. And number 2, create the shared storage for Apache web server. So create file system. At first time, LVM conf enable the cluster, so in all cluster nodes. So your all cluster node must support the clustering service based on especially LVM. Please check etc/LVM conf. So here please tell locking time. Locking time must be the number 3. And after that, you need to the physical volume the device. In my case, like this, DB mapper 190.0.0.1, 0.0.1, this one P, the partition number. So if we have already the existing or the current the logical volume, then you don't need to create the physical volume and volume group. So in my case, I already created the volume group, volume 1 and volume 2 like this. So in my case, I will create like this. The size, the 100 megabyte name, in my case, Apache, the LV logical volume, and slash dv slash vg1. So this logical volume will belong to the volume group 1. And after that, we need to create the GFS file system, GFS2, the journal, and rocking the protocol, and table, in my case, knowledge peer, web, and device. Device means dv vg1 slash the logical volume name, in my case, the Apache LV. And after that, you need to register this kind of information to etc slash fs tab. So later, even if you deliver to your system anytime, your system will mount the device to this mount point directly. And the file system and the option, this one, net DVE and general. And after that, the last step to use this kind of file system is a mount. So file system type, option, no accessing time. So dvbj Apache LV logical volume to mount the point. VAR, WW, HTML like this. So copy all the required files to the document root directory. So if we need any the file or directory to share to all cluster node, then you can copy this kind of files. Apache Cluster using the Conga. So before you configure the Apache Cluster using the Conga, the cluster system must be working well based on Conga. So then, step 1, define the fancy device. And so here, fancy device, select the fancy device name and the node and configure. And after that, step 2 here, define failover domain. In my case, I already told you I have the existing current the failover domain like a web server and database. So in my case, I will select this one failover domain name will be the web server with the order restricted and priority options, and then create the failover domain for each service. So if we need the failover domain for each service, anytime you can create. Step 3, define the resources for clustered web services. So fancy device and the failover domain, we can say this is the direct or the mandatory the factors for clustering configuration. But step 3, okay, here this is define the resource for cluster web service. So for the cluster web service, we have to configure or define this kind of resource. So here there are 3 the resources. First one, GFS2 as a file system. Second, IP address. Third, script. So in case of the GFS2, I already told you the name will be web root, the mount point VALWW/HTML, and the device, the dvbg1 Apache, the logical volume, and the file system type GFS2, and option no access. In case of IP address, this one 192.168.8.50 would normally say floating IP address with the option monitor link. In case of the script, name will be the HTTPD, and this HTTPD normally point the path etc/rc./init.d/httpd. The step 4, now we need to define the clustered service. So here, service, you have to select a first time service group, and at that, we need to add service name. In my case, will be web service, and the failover belong to the web server, and the recovery policy will be restart or relocate. And at that option, automatically start this service, and the service name and the resource file system, IP address, and script. In my case, in case of the file system, it's a GFS2. The step 5, the test clustered web service. So after you submit all this kind of the information to the service group, then start web service 1 the other cluster node, and after that, check the clustered service using this command CLUST8. then you will see this kind of web service to the migrate or move or transfer to another cluster node. Then you are successful to configure Apache Cluster. Apache Cluster using the CCS. So I already told you the fate of a domain in chapter 8. So I already show you how to create the fate of domain. Add the fate of domain, domain name, and option like restricted and order. And adding the node here, fate of domain name, and node 1, node 2 will belong to this fate of domain. And step 2, define the resources. So here, ccs-h node 01. So all the configuration file will be saved to this cluster node. And after that, add the resource. So here, file system, in my case, the cluster fs. And the device, db bridge1 Apache with the device name. And the false amount is option. And file system type will be the gfs2. And mount for var/ww/html. And the name, in my case, will be web root. And the options, no access time, self, the fencing on. Second resource is IP address. So in my case, the floating IP address is 192.168.80.50 with this kind of option, monitor, link on, and sleeping time 1. And the third is a script. Okay, name, in my case, httpd file, the purpose, etc/int./int./httpd. So if you are successful to create a resource, then you can check your configuration using this command, get conf. Step 3, define the cluster the service. So now I already created the 3 kinds of the resources. Using this resource, we can create the service. So here, add service. Service name, in my case, web service. Domain means the fate of domain. So in my case, web server. And the max restarted the 3 times. And the name, the web service. Okay, this one. And the recovery, restart or relocate. And if we select restart, then restart is by a time is 600. And after that, add serve service. Add service means adding the resources. In my case, web service, the name of the service, and the resource name, okay, IP reference, okay, floating IP address, script reference, and cluster file system is a web root. So if you are the complete this kind of configuration, then here sync activate, and at that cement tool buzzard-r, and this command is same. It means the update the main configuration file, and at that start all get conf, then check your all configuration content, and at that clusta or cement tool service, then this command will show you the eject our new created services. Testing, test the clustered web service. So I already told you the cluster status, and after that we need to index file here in any cluster node. Okay, var www.html index.html. In my case, I will create like this, knowledge via Apache Cluster service. And after that, if we want to test like this, okay, using the clu sbc admin this command. So -r means the relocate web service, the name of the service, member node01.chal.com. The web service will transfer to this the cluster member. B, clash the one of the resources. So in node 1, you can kill all the web Apache, the process, okay, HTTP. And after that, the clusta, then this the web service will transfer to another cluster node. Using this one, ping www.chal.com, you can test. Okay, for the lab testing, I prefer for the 4 cluster nodes. So manager as a send, node 1, node 2, node 3. In node 1, I will configure. Okay, at first time, please check your Apache status. So list http. So in my case, it's all the run level. This one is turned off. And the second, configuration the Apache file. So in my case here, okay, let's open http.main configuration file. Okay, line number 136. So here, listen, and 192.168.50. So this is a floating IP address. So, and 80. Okay, line number 921 here, location, server status. Okay, server status. The local host and 192.168.0.0/024, the network mask. So this network can access to see or check the server status. This main configuration file must be the same to another cluster. Okay, let's check here. Node 2. So this will also same. Okay, like this, and the recent as well. Okay, that number 136. So same. So the node 3 as well. So if I check the IP address, okay, here 192.168.88. Okay, node 2. Node 2 also is IP address is 192.168.89, and node 3 as well. This one is 8010. So if we want to supply the Apache cluster, we have to use the floating IP address, and this kind of floating IP address. So in the 3 cluster we cannot find. So later you will see. So now I'm successful to the configure Apache configuration file. So disable HTTP service and configure for the listen and server status. And after that, cluster service in all cluster nodes. So here, in my case, I'm using the Conga. So here, knowledge via cluster name. So node 1, node 2, and node 3. And I already create the favorable domain to web server and the database. Fans device as well. Okay, my fans. But the resource, no resource yet, and service group as well. Okay, like this I don't have. So now the 3 cluster node is working well, and now I'm ready to use or configure the Apache cluster. Before the creating this kind of resource and the service group, we have to check the storage, shared storage. So for the shared storage, in my case, let's check here. Lucy, sorry, this one manager, okay, service PS. Lucy is working well. Node 1, Lucy, okay, is working. And the node 2 as well. Okay, is working. And the node 3 as well. And create the shared storage for Apache. So in my case, I already enabled the LVM conf. So we can etc. Okay, here login type is 3. So now I'm ready to use LVM and the GFS2. So for the GFS file system in node 1, I will create. At first time, let's check logical volume. So in my case, I have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, the logical volume. And the volume group, there are 2 volume group, volume group 1 and volume group 2. So in my case, I will create, so this one using volume group 1. So now let's create the logical volume first. LV create. So here size 1 GB and the name LV DB volume group 1. Okay, then LVS. So I create this one 1 GB. And the second, let's create the GFS file system MKFS GFS2 hyphen the, in my case, the P rock protocol DLM, and the journal okay, 3, and the size is 50 megabyte, and that table and web service, and the device DB volume group 1 Apache logical volume. Okay, yes. Okay, now I'm a create this one using this one Apache the logical volume size and the locking protocol and the rock table. And after that, let's try to mount this GFS file system okay, using this mount -t GFS2 and the option no accessing time and db volume group 1 LV and mount point in my case. Okay, then let's check. Okay, like this. DB volume group 1 and Apache LV logical volume. And after that, let's go here so we cannot find any file. So here I will create index file. Okay, in my case, HTML. And HTML like this. And the permission. Okay. So now I'm ready to use the web service in Node 1 using GFS file system. So now using this information, let's try to create Apache web the clustering service in using the Conga. Okay, so now I already told you the cluster node 1 and node 2, node 3, and each cluster node has their own the fencing method. Okay, let's check. Okay, here. Okay, fade of domain, web server, and the database, and the method fencing method is test 1, and the fencing device name is myFence using this one. And also the cman, the rgmanager, receive mode cluster CLVM is running in all cluster node. So now let's check the fade of domain. I already told you this one. Fadeable, there are two web server, and in my case I will use the web server. So now let's go to the resource first. Okay, here let's create the resource add. So in my case, first time I will use IP address. So IP address 192.168.50. This is a floating IP address, and the bit is a 24. Okay, this one, and the ocean monitor ring, and number of the second to sleep after removing. Okay, 10. Okay, submit. Okay, now I create one the resource is a IP address, and the second here add. So here I will select the script. Okay, so in my case script. So name here httpd and the purpose etc. Okay, in my case I will use this one etc rc./init.d http submit. Okay, now I create the httpd as a script as well. So now one more the resource. Okay, here now here GFS2. Okay, name this one with a web root in my case. Okay, and the mount point var www.html, and the device here dev volume group 1 and Apache LV, and file system type the GFS2, and the mount option so no accessing type. Okay, this one, and the file system is optional, and the false amount yes, and the reboot host node if amount fail. Okay, and submit. Okay, now I create the IP address and the script and file system. Now I will apply all this one. Okay, then let's check this kind of the configuration. So it is etc cluster conf. So for the resource part here, IP address and script name httpd and cluster fs. Can you find this cluster fs device the volume group 1 and Apache logical volume, false amount the enable, and the ID and the file system type, mount for var, ww, html, and the name is a web root, and the options no access time, self fence, what enable, like this. So now I create 3 the resources. It's time to create the service group. So here let's add, so in my case web service, and automatically the start this service, and the run is classic, and the fate of domain, this one belong to web server, and the recovery policy here, relocate, restart, disable, and disable. In my case I will select relocate. Okay, at first time submit. Okay, now I create the web service, but the web service does not have any the resource. So here let's add the resource. Okay, type. Okay, so in my case now I create the 3 kind the resource. Okay, first time IP address. So this one, the float as the floating the IP address. And the second the script. Okay, here script, name the HTTPD and pass, right? And the third, let's add the file system GFS2 and add that submit. Okay, then now web service is running node1 the char.com. So this one here, okay, 3 the resources, IP address and the script and GFS2. Okay, let's check here. So using this one, now let's check the cluster's status. So now this one, okay, node 1 started the rgmanager, but node 2 and node 3 not yet. So now we need to propagate this the configuration file to the other cluster node as well. Sync, activate. Okay, then let's check cluster status. So here now the node 2, okay, and node 3. Now this one is a web service. It's working on node 1, and also cman. Okay, so here can you find this web service? So rgmanager as well and web service. And the node 2, okay, let's check. So now only the CLVM. So let's try to. Okay, then, and the node 3 as well. Okay, let's check. Okay, so now node 1, node 2, node 3, and also starting rgmanager, and now web service is working on node 1. Okay, like this. So here let's test for the cluster. At first time, now as you see, now the web service is working node 1. So let's try to use the CLU SBC ADM. So CLU SBC ADM. So now the relocate the service name here. Okay, web service. So web, and remember now the node 1 is supplied this web service to the client, but now I will change to node 2. Okay, like this. Cluster here, the web service is working on node 2. Okay, like this. And now let's try to migrate to another cluster node. So CLU SBC ADM, in my case relocate. So web service node 3 Okay, no, here member. So okay, now it's at first time this one the web service is working on the node 2, but we can say it's a node 3 success, and at that let's check. So now we can find node 3, and the node 3, okay, let's check. So now we can find the index.html. At first time I created this file in node 1, but now this one is working where? In node 3. So I'm successful to use the CLU SBC ADM to migrate the web service to another cluster node. So using the browser, so we can find www.churl.com and rgmanager Apache Cluster service. For this information, okay, let's check etc host. So can you find this one? 192.80.50 www.churl.com domain and www. So this IP address 50.80.50 is a floating IP address. So using this information, I can access this domain, and this domain is showing the index file like this. And the second testing, the clash the one of the resources. So now let's go to the here node 3 and let's check web service daemon. So let's the kill or Apache the daemon. Okay, the process kill hyphen the 9 httpd. Now in node 3 we cannot find the web the daemon. So then we can find this kind of the messages. Okay, node 2 churl.com and recoverable. So let's go to the node 2 here. So recoverable and node 1. So now here in this service, web service is started where? In node 1. Okay, let's go to the node 2 as well. So now you can see node 1.churl.com, and at that the mounting information, okay, here BLW, and the domain also web domain is working well. And anytime and any node, if we check, okay, we can find this one 8050, and node 2 also, okay, from floating IP address, and node 3, okay, is working well. Even if node 2 is stop the web service, but anytime this web service can be the fail over to another cluster node. At first time the node 2 and the node 3 supplied this kind of service, but now in node 1, okay, let's check here. So now node 1 supply this web service using cluster. And in the clustering system, okay, let's check service group. Okay, we can see now the running on node 1. And if we check in detail, so web server and the relocate, so anytime we can test this Apache the cluster using Conga and CCS. So for the CCS as well, okay, cman, so we can find the web service. And the node 2, so node 1 and rgmanager and the cman tool, okay, we can find the rgmanager. So if now Apache Cluster is working on the node 1, but the node 1 transfer this service to node 2, then node 2 also will see the web service here. Okay, so far I show you how to configure Apache cluster using CCS and the Conga, and also I show you the Apache cluster testing. Even if one cluster node is shut down for the specific service, but another cluster can fail over this service. In chapter 13, we studied this kind of the things. First one, which configuration do we need for Apache cluster in etc httpd httpd.conf. So this is a main configuration file for Apache. And the second, how can we create a logical volume for Apache the directory? For Apache, in case Apache directory is default is var/ww/html. For this directory, we can create the logical volume. And number three, how can we use the Conga and CSS to configure Apache the cluster? I already show you. And number four, which resources do we need to configure Apache service? I already told you Apache service needs three kinds of resources. And number five, how can we test Apache cluster? So if we are successful to configure Apache cluster on the cluster, in my case, the three cluster nodes, and then if we shut down the cluster node, then the other cluster node must fail over this service from the failed cluster node. And number six, which command do you need to relocate web service to node 2? At first time, this web service can be working or running on node 1, but if we need to relocate this service to another cluster node, then in this case, what kind of command we can use? Okay, thank you for watching this video. God bless you and see you in next chapter.